Hey, this is the Beyond the Dojo podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Jeremiah.
You know, I actually wanted to intro this episode. You know that meme where the dude slaps the car? He's like, you can fit so much bullcrap in this car. I wanted to go, you can fit so much cool stuff or smart stuff or whatever in this podcast.
I think you should just say, crap.
Okay, well, it's not bullcrap, okay? We're smart people. So the other day, I gave a student a black eye.
Yeah.
But he's not like, a big student. Him's like little.
Yeah. Well,
He's like 7.
we told that kid for months, you need to learn how to stay away from people. He has a habit of scooching in. I got crap all in my mouth.
You have coffee on your face.
Sorry. He has a habit in training where he doesn't keep his social distancing. He likes to kind of sneak up and hide in little corners and misplaced. And
we're doing kicks in a line, everybody facing to the side, and he ends up 6 inches from the person in front of him with a huge gap behind him. We're like, dude,
tucked up on the side of the dude's butt. He's I don't know.
And he's the smallest person in his class. So I was behind them when they were lined up to leave because we have a back door behind where we line up everybody before and after class, and I was gonna go get all the stuff for them to play, and I don't even know how he got to where I was, but he basically walked behind the line and my hand went up and I had a semi pseudo fist and I punched him right in the face. Oh my God. It was well deserved, but yeah. I did feel really bad.
Yeah, we've been telling that kid for months, you gotta give everybody space, you're gonna get hit one day.
So he can tell all of his friends that he got a black eye from a black belt. Poor bud.
Don't feel bad for him at all. Sometimes, pain is the best teacher sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So but he ain't learned from it.
No, he's still up on everybody.
Yeah, he's still up on people. It's good Lord,
I'm sure he'll get kicked one or two times and then he'll...
I doubt that. No, this kid's... it takes a lot for him to learn.
Right. Well, speaking of students, today we're talking about community building because it's come up in the dojo a lot, and then also actually in our church and church group, and actually it's something I think that a lot of
online too, social media.
And online, right? Yeah, and that's something we even kind of talked about in our podcast with Rick Houghton is the whole idea of community building. So do you want to kind of start that off as far as what some of your thoughts were? How did you? You've basically been part of more dojos than I have at this point, and you had your own dojo for a while as well. What are some of the strategies that you use to kind of build communities in some of your previous locations?
Well, I'll give credit where credit's due. When I started going down to Rick's dojo down in Sarasota, for the very first couple times, it was. I think there was all black belts, so he had a different dynamic. And that at that time, it was really cool to see how he included everybody. Although he was the teacher and he led the class, he included everybody in everything. And he would do things like, it was an adult dojo, so understand that. And then secondly, we would train for about an hour and a half, and then we'd sit there and have conversations at the end of class.
Right.
Now, those who drank would have a beer because the dojo refrigerator had beer, and it wasn't you couldn't bring in Budweiser or anything like that. It had to be something nice. So there was
fancy pants beer.
Yes, I think Langley said
no PBR.
We're alcoholics with a karate problem.
He said we're a drinking club with a karate problem.
A drinking club with a karate problem. And I kind of liked that because the conversations that came out of that were really interesting and really motivating. It wasn't necessarily always about karate. It was about life and everything else. But give him credit, man. That was, to me, eye-opening.
Yeah.
Because all the other dojos I've ever been to really didn't care about... I had got the feeling that they didn't care about the rest of your life. All they cared about was what your karate was.
Right.
So class would end. You'd get dressed, you might talk for 5 minutes, then you leave. There was no talking about how you're doing or how's life going. None of that.
Yeah.
And it felt kind of empty.
Yeah. I think when I was coming up, I don't think we had. I'm not saying that we were anti-building community, and no one was mean or facetious about it, but
Right.
we didn't really. I don't think that was necessarily a priority, and I think most dojos maybe don't think about
Right.
building a dojo like that.
Right.
And I can see a huge advantage of focusing a ton on on your technical ability and building up that way and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But in order to be able to cultivate a dojo that lasts and also to make something worthwhile, there also has to be this personal and social element to it. And
Right.
I had never experienced that before.
That you have to have the budo.
Right.
Yeah, bujitsu is the technical stuff. It's the, how you make this work, how you perform the technique. But the do part, the life part, has to be there.
Yeah.
And I think that was the element that, like I said, Rick, it kind of just opened my eyes. I was like, wow.
Right.
That's what these dojos been missing, And it's not, like you said, it wasn't like they were deliberately trying to keep you away. They just, no one really put a lot of effort into it.
Right.
And to build the community, you have to be deliberate. You have to be deliberately involved in people's lives to an extent.
Right.
You have to care about what's going on in their life. You have to be willing to listen to when they want to share. And you have to get them involved.
Right.
You can't just be the teacher and then be their buddy after class and then have no kind of no opportunity for them to give back, to actually give into the community, you know? And that goes for church or anything else, any kind of social groups, You don't want everybody to be a consumer.
Right.
You want someone to kind of provide content, provide things also. And, when I saw that and I started kind of, obviously you can't do it exactly. You can offer kids beers. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't.
Well, you could.
You go to jail.
You might get in trouble.
But the concept was the same.
Yeah.
So, in our class, although it's a little redundant, but at the beginning of class, when they line up, I usually generally take about 5 minutes to go, hey, how you doing today? What's going on in your life? What's the cool thing that happened? What was for lunch? It doesn't have to be something in depth, but it has to be something outside of karate.
Right.
And that to me is where our community started to cultivate.
Right.
It was just the caring about what the kids were doing outside of karate and how that affected. And that's parents, let's be real. Nowadays, parents aren't wanting their kids to go to karate to be world champions or these amazing karateka with these amazing techniques. That's on the lower part of their list. If you ask them what they're here for, number one, they'll generally say discipline. Right? And then the other part, and then they'll say within the next couple, the social aspect of things. Especially with COVID and homeschoolers and the way things are, they want that interaction also.
Yeah.
So
when I used to, whenever we would start off the 4 and 5 year olds class, one of the biggest issues with them was getting them focused in on what they were supposed to do. And this was before I kind of knew how to structure the class. And we have a more mature group now, so I don't have to do this as much. And we also stopped doing it during COVID. But before class, I used to have all of the kids go sit before I say line up. We would go sit down and make a circle. And then that's how we would start off talking about our day. So we would go around the circle, and one kid would talk about his day. Well, one kid's spinning like he's breakdancing on the floor, and then another kid's trying to crawl in your lap, and then everyone's trying to interrupt each other, but it at least gave them a chance to get it off their chest and get it out. And that was a way for them to connect with each other. What your favorite food is, or what you had for lunch, or I can't remember, or whatever.
What'd you play for recess?
Right, yeah. I played that too. But the funniest thing is when you ask really young kids what they had for lunch, and one kid says what they had for lunch, and the other kid is like, I had the same thing. And they go to the same school but they don't know.
And they go to the cafeteria, and it's okay, but that's
but
the
they
thing.
begin to see the connections outside of the dojo.
Right. You kind of gotta encourage that. And with little kids, it's easy. You just kind of talk about, like you said, the day, what's going on. But as your teenagers and young adults,
I can't remember earlier than what happened at lunchtime.
Right. And then with the teenagers and adults, it's a little different. You're not prying into their life as much, especially with teenagers. They get a little guarded. They don't want to talk about it, right?
Right.
So generally, you'll just go the small talk. Yeah. Did you see that show? Hey, did you catch that meme or whatever? And you kind of talk to them that way, or talk about social events, and it kind of builds a relationship, right?
I ask them what video games they play, because a lot of them do play video games, or ask them, whatever.
As a sensei, we're trying to get them to learn that you have certain roles in certain situations, but that's not who you are, right? You are a sensei, but you're not always a sensei. You know what I mean? You could be someone else, but they have to understand the distinction.
Whenever, like, you're kind of flip-flopping back and forth.
Yeah, back and forth. So when we work, I'm the teacher, but when we're not working, I'm Jeremiah, who's an adult that you should have some respect for, but I don't walk on water. I'm not this, this ultimate guy. I'm just everyday Joe. Right. And everyday Jay. Yes. But that whole like humility and vulnerability that these adults and teens have to see, because it gives you a sense of realism. Right. That the kids might put you on a pedestal because kids tend to do that. But as teens and adults come along, if you try to maintain that pedestal, they're gonna look at you like you're an idiot.
I think we may have talked about this in a previous episode, but something that Steve Ubel Sensei says is that a lot of times these high level instructors were just like off the dojo floor, don't call me sensei, like just call me by my name, and
this
like we're buddies. You don't have to put me on this pedestal. And Steve is obviously very much like that as well.
Absolutely.
You don't need to treat him like he's some kind of a god. He's like, nah, I'm just Steve.
I would say, and I think we said it in that podcast too, is like, hey, that's a red flag if they want to be called sensei and this and that ego has to be stroked. That's a red flag. Generally.
Well, if they're very much like, bow to your sensei.
Yeah, absolutely. But to continue with that, the adults and the teens like that realism that you're just some other dude, and you're humble enough to apologize when you make mistakes. That to me is probably one of the stronger ingredients to a good community. Is the idea that we're all human here. I'm just sharing knowledge, and I can make mistakes. And you just apologize and move on.
Do you want to share the mistake that happened in the lobby the other day?
Oh, God.
We don't have to share it.
Yeah, I'll share it. I'll say it. All right. So being the slightly bullheaded teacher, I hate the fact when a student will come to the dojo and not train.
Like they have siblings.
They'll have siblings there and they'll just sit there.
Yeah.
It bothers me.
Like these are enrolled students, by the way.
Yeah, they're enrolled students, and they show up and they're just hanging out in the dojo. I'm like, we're not a social club here, right? So
are we?
Kind of are in a sense, but it just bothers me. So I confronted these two ladies. They're preteen age, and so why have you guys training today? Da 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 da. Oh, we just came to sit and watch and blah blah blah. And they weren't very clear about the answers, and I was already in the bullheaded mode. Like, you guys aren't going to slack off, and you're not going to turn this into some hangout joint, right? So I was like, when you come to the dojo, you should train. Yeah. And they were like, oh, da 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 da. And I kind of gave them the spiel. I kind of gave them that, like, you got to train. You're not just hanging out here. And I didn't realize at the time
Jeremiah.
What point of the month it was.
Well, Jeremiah goes to walk off the floor, and I looked at him, and I was like, that was very rude. You have no idea why they chose not to train. It could be any number of girl things. He was like,
oh my God, dude. Right? And it just sunk in my head like, I am the biggest freaking idiot that walked this earth. Because
all the parents are just looking at him like, come on, man.
Yeah, totally missed it. And I walked up to the two girls' parents. I was like, look, I'm sorry. I'm bullheaded. If you have a chance, talk to them about it. And then I decided, you know what? That's not acceptable. So I walked over to them and I looked dead in the face. I said, I'm an idiot sometimes. And I don't understand what goes on with a girl's body and what's going on there. Please forgive me. I was extremely rude. And I didn't recognize. And they kind of both looked at me dumbfounded. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem.
Now, we don't know that's why they weren't training, but you do have to take that into consideration.
I had to take that into consideration. But I will say this. One of the girls' mother kind of confirmed.
I know. Yeah, she was like, yeah, that's what's happening right now.
And I was like, oh, God. But at the same time,
it was good that you took that step.
Because that
would have been so bad. I have experienced in the past that type of behavior without a sensei apologizing. I've watched it happen in other places.
That's the human. That's being a good human. It's like, oh man, I really messed that up. I'm sorry. Yeah. And it wasn't. I didn't bring this attention to me like I'm apologizing. Look at me, I'm apologizing. It was very quiet. It was very personal and it was very honest. And you know what? I meant it. You know, I honestly, it was a mistake. I said, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I didn't think or consider that. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And the girls had no problem.
Right.
You know, they were like, okay, cool. And actually, one of them made a joke about it when they went back on the floor the next time they were there. So I felt like that was like the sign of saying, all right, we're cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're cool about this. I'm like, all right, cool. I don't have to talk about it no more. I don't have to, you know.
Don't think about it anymore.
Yeah, dudes don't think about that. It doesn't occur.
Yeah.
So, yes. So now everybody that watches us is going to be like, yeah, he's a freaking idiot.
Dude, honestly, there's a bunch of people I think that don't think that. Right?
Yeah.
I think there's even women that would just be like, because everyone experiences, their bodies are all different.
Yeah.
Some people cannot train when they're going through that time of the month. So it's just it's different per person, and you wouldn't even know. Well, you know, speaking of really good habits to have as an instructor, but also as a student or as a senpai or whatever, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit about like other people's roles in the dojo and like maybe how they should set a good example as far as community building. Right.
So, you know, as you get higher in your ranking, we, like most dojos, as children progress, at least most dojos I've been part of, they systematically start to give these kids responsibilities in the dojo. Mm-hmm. And we look at it as like giving them tasks to do, but they look at it as like, I'm being treated special. Uh-huh. Even if it's putting the toys away after the game. Mm-hmm. That is something like, yeah, I'm that guy that gets to do that. No one else gets to do that. Mm-hmm. So as children and as lower ranks, we generally do that. With teens and adults, they really don't care.
Yeah.
So it's more about, you know, letting them coach younger adults up or younger belts up a little bit and allowing them to share their opinion or their knowledge with them, even if they're lower ranked.
I think everybody enjoys that, though. For all ranks, I feel like they all love getting the chance to share what they know and getting the chance to coach and having a chance to step into that role. I loved that when I was coming up in rank, and I know that our kids, especially, and teens and adults, respond well to it. Yeah,
but what I'm trying to say is that's for non-downgraded students. Generally, we'll give them that opportunity to coach more.
Right.
Now, what happens with our downgrades is that we've always said it, but we kind of fell off the train a little bit, and that's we give them the opportunity to teach.
Right.
Teach a class, and, you know, generally they'll be like, well, what do we teach? I don't know. What do you want to teach?
Yeah.
You know, we allow them the complete reign to do what they want.
I mean, we're essentially working on basic concepts with all these Q ranks, so it doesn't really matter what topic they choose.
You know, even the funny thing was, like, the other week we gave one of the black belts at the dojo the opportunity to teach, and he thought it'd be funny and fun for the kids to go through Gankaku.
Oh gosh.
Right? But he did it in such a way that it made sense.
Right.
He was like, all right, just follow me, and da-da-da. And he didn't slow down. He didn't go really fast. He counted them out, but he didn't slow down or correct or teach anything. He just like, we're going to go through this.
Yeah, that was how he ended class.
That's how he ended class. And to me, that was genius.
Yeah.
Because it shows them, hey, this is this cool stuff we're going to do.
Yeah.
And then it also shows them, you're not ready for it yet, obviously.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you're falling down.
Yeah.
You're not ready.
Yeah.
So I just love that about the black belts at our dojo is, you know, they all have a lot of experience. Mm-hmm. They all have their own experiences. You know, some of these guys have literally trained their entire karate life under JK instructors, JK graduate instructors. You know, like, and that to me is like such an opportunity and such a wealth of knowledge, right? Obviously, we don't maybe not go the same route,
right?
But at the same time, it's valuable,
right?
So letting your black belts teach.
Yeah.
And being able to walk away and not be a hovering sensei. Mm-hmm. You know, freaking out about what they're teaching.
Right.
It's not what we're doing right now. It's just let them have it.
Yeah.
You know, because the students will understand the difference.
Right.
Eventually.
Right. And if you're bringing up your students to understand good, like, basic principles, basic ideas, and they are given consistent correction, then they essentially know what to look for. And believe it or not, especially when you give them the opportunity to coach other students, they develop an eye for the corrections that they've been given.
Right.
So, you know, they'll watch an instructor. Sometimes he'll show something different, and they'll be able to pick up on that, and maybe it helps a little bit, but they are able to like keep an eye out for the things that they're trying to work on and whatever. Even if the instructor doesn't make corrections on that, they at least kind of know. They're able to see it in themselves in the mirror. They're able to physically feel it. Whatever. They've just been lazy and haven't implemented it in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that's the one of our what we're blessed with, and that's the idea that we have two on the floor all the time. We usually
For the most part, yeah.
We have generally one of us will lead, and the other one walks around and coaches up.
Right.
So the stragglers and the ones that are having a difficult time, they get not only instruction, but they get coaching, personal coaching in that moment.
Right.
And I think that's has led to them having a better understanding of what's going on. So, dude, we're very blessed for that. Yeah. But now the hard part is this: is some of these dojos you'll never have this issue because you're building from scratch. You know, you're from ground up, and you're never gonna have these. You're generally gonna be the highest ranked person there as the teacher.
Yeah, it's tough.
And that's tough because everything falls on you.
Yeah, you're basically having to build an entire foundation on your own. I couldn't have imagined having to do that. I don't know if I could have done it on my own. There's no way.
Even if you take one over, and you're the only person there teaching, it's tough.
Well, even when I took over, I had helpers. I mean, I had boys who had been essentially filling in and teaching for years before I started managing the whole thing. If it weren't for them at that point, I don't think I could have done it.
Like my first dojo, I was too bullheaded to allow any of the kids help. I was too concerned about how it's going to go down. Yeah. So I was immature in that approach and took the whole responsibility on me, which I learned from that experience that's just not worth it. It's not worth it. You know, it's not worth it for the student. It's not worth it for the teacher. It's better to involve everybody. Right. That being said, we're blessed to have black belts come in from out of town who've trained a lot, who has higher rank than us, and they're the coolest people because you could tell their character is good by how they respond to the situation. When we first had this guy come in, I was like, look, man, you outrank me in years and dawn ranking, everything. Right. How do you want to go about this? Right. I don't know how to handle this. Right. And he told me something that was really cool. He says, it's your dojo, man. I'm just here to train. Yeah. And I thought, yeah. So to me, that was just like, oh, thank God. Yeah. Right?
I feel like a lot of guys are like that, where like they are up for training on their own. They're not necessarily interested in like running their own dojo necessarily. Right. They just want to train. So they don't feel like they have to have the final say on everything, or they have to be the one who's ultimately the right person. Right.
So when that situation arises and you want to have them part of your community, like we said earlier, we have them teach on occasion. We don't put the burden on them. We try not to put a burden on them to where they feel like they have to teach all the time. Right.
I want to talk about that for just a second. There is a difference when you're building a community so our therapist actually talks about this even with our relationship, but essentially like the idea of forcing roles onto people as opposed to providing opportunity for people. So I grew up in a dojo where I appreciated the fact that lots of instructors were teaching, but the unfortunate thing about the way it was set up is essentially these roles were forced onto people who really kind of didn't have a choice, because they either taught or the dojo shut down, just because the instructor had to travel a lot and he was busy with his business and stuff like that. And I feel like that created a lot of resentment in a lot of the students and a lot of the dan ranks, where they felt like they weren't being fed and they never really had the opportunity to continue their own training because they were busy having to teach everyone else, and it wasn't their dojo. Right. So when you do that and you force that onto people, and it's way too frequent, you have to think about volunteers. We even talk about this in our church. Right. When you have someone volunteering for something, if it is an indefinite amount of time they're going to be volunteering, I don't think that's a good idea, because especially if it's extremely frequent, essentially they're going to fall off the wagon. Right. If you have them say, okay, if it's going to be a very consistent, very like frequent, like a big commitment, doing a very short sprint, like a 6-week, 8-week, 12-week amount of time that they're going to be committed to this thing, that's fine. Yeah. But to have someone committing to a role indefinitely, very frequently, it's too much for some people, and generally they're going to fall off the wagon.
You're taking advantage of the person.
Basically, yeah.
Even if your intention isn't to do that, you still are.
But to rein it back a little bit and be like, hey, could you do like once a month, or could you maybe twice a month or whatever, or
even let them
something
set...
that's not as frequent.
Right.
Doing that indefinitely, I think, is a better approach as opposed to just
or allow them to set the frequency.
Right, something that they could realistically do. Now, if they're young, they're not gonna know.
No, we're
exactly
talking about
how.
experienced karateka that come and train.
This has happened with kids too, though.
Yeah. I came in when I moved back from Japan and to upstate New York. I came in as a shodan, as a 12-year-old shodan, and at that time, the norm rule was you're not a shodan. You don't allow to test for shodan until 16. So for the first couple months, they were basically testing me to see if I actually knew what I knew or if I was of standard, right? But after they realized I was, all of a sudden now I'm teaching, beginner kids and beginner adults.
Right.
I'm constantly teaching.
Right.
And it's like
that's a bit much.
Yeah, it is. Even with me being as passionate as it was and knowing that eventually I wanted to own my own dojo and wanted to do this, it burnt me out.
Right.
I was burnt out by the age 16.
That's messed up.
I didn't want it. I was teaching 4 classes a week, plus training 2 classes per 3 nights, so 6 classes a night, or 6 classes a week.
Right.
That was just like way too much for me. And then when I was competitive,
I have so much to say about that. I shouldn't say. Go ahead.
And then when I was competing, I put it on myself to train even more and to condition myself, and it became this year-round grind for like 3 years. But it produced results,
right?
And it taught me a lot. But at the same time, it cost me a lot because now, when I was in my 20s, I walked away from karate because I didn't want to just teach.
Yeah,
I wasn't being fed, like you said. And that's the next point in community building, is that you have to find a way as a dojo head to continually feed your black belts some kind of information, some kind of perspective change. Do you expect them to follow what you're saying? No.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Do exactly what you teach.
Right. But you've given them ideas, and you're giving them these different perspectives so that they make the choice to see if they want to add it to their karate.
Right.
It's their karate. It's their art. They can express it however they want. And that there is a hard lesson to learn if you're used to telling people to do this. It's this way.
Right.
You have to go, you know what? I gave them the opportunity. They took and considered it, and they decided not to take it.
I had a really hard time with that at first when we first opened up our dojo, because we had a number of guys who were of higher rank as well. And this is not a sexism thing, but I did feel uncomfortable teaching men. It's not anything wrong with them. It's just I wasn't used to it. I was so used to teaching children and women that once we started having all these men in the dojo, I wasn't really sure what approach to take. And I'm sometimes a little bit passive about it. I'll give correction and not give it specifically to them. But I'm a little bit wary of people's ego, and I try to not be off-putting. And that's my downfall, I need to work on that. But when I would give correction or give ideas I wanted people to work on, and they just straight up didn't do it, I'm just like, I'm not being validated. I feel bad, blah, 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 like make it about myself. And it's not really anything to do with me. It's just that they're choosing just to not listen. It wouldn't matter if I was teaching or Jeremiah was teaching or whatever. They have their own thing that they're working on. So that took a while for me to get past that point, to realize like, hey, we can still be in this together and not necessarily be on the same path necessarily, because we have totally different backgrounds.
Right.
You're training here and helping volunteer sometimes, but you're not as invested in this club necessarily as we are. This is our business. And I did want to make a quick point about this too. We're talking about people on a volunteer basis. Obviously, if you're like a professional dojo that's paying people, obviously that's totally different. You set the hours and pay and whatever. But you have to approach your teaching and the structure of your community based on what type of club you're running. Is this a business that is literally for profit? Is it set up as a non-profit? Is it just a club? Are you guys just training together? If you're just training together and you're like at a college, or you're just kind of doing this because you all enjoy it and there's no you're not really making an income from it, that's different, where you're trying to get other people to step up and help keep this community running. Right. That's one thing. But if you're running this as a business, that's where the responsibility really falls on you. It's still important that you build a community. I think it's even more important. Right. But you have to be very careful about the way that you go about that, because the moment you start to shrug things off on other people, that's why people build resentment.
Right.
Is because this is your business that you're not taking care of, and
Your
I'm basically
livelihood.
running your business for you. That's not okay.
Yeah, making money for you as
Right.
you kind of don't even care what I'm doing and
Right.
not respect me. I totally get that, and that's you have to know your people. You have to
Right.
know your black belts. You have to understand what backgrounds they come from. You know, you can't be artsy fartsy with a engineer. You know what I'm saying?
Well, maybe they needed that kind of outlet. You could be, I guess.
It could be, but if you want to talk their language and make a connection, you got to understand their perspective and how they see things.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as saying, how do you learn?
Right. Yeah.
Do you break things apart? Do you make it mechanical, or is it just this general feeling you feel?
Right.
And that right there is, like we said, making that connection, making that point where they go, you know what, even though he might not look at it this way, he's trying to see it the way I see it. He's investing in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I believe that's one of the things that keeps a lot of our older black belts here.
Yeah.
Is the fact that, it's different.
Right.
We're on different pages, but they genuinely know we're investing in what something their interests are trying to get the point to them.
I did want to make one other point about that a little bit.
You made a lot of points, man.
Look here, I am
Hey,
a point maker.
It's like a pin pillow. We got so many points.
I have some of those. I forgot now because you distracted me. Hold on a minute. Oh, so when you're having people come in and they're volunteering to teach, like, not as frequently, I think one thing that we've noticed happen is people who essentially grew up in a different dojo or who came up in a different dojo, your advanced ranks, they are more respectful of the route that you're headed as a dojo. Like, that's the reason that we have these guys asking us, what would you like me to teach? You know, is there anything that I'm teaching that doesn't line up with the direction that you're headed?
Right.
They do that because, you know, we have this established routine. We've been working with these students. They can see this progression. They're just stepping in on occasion to provide an alternative perspective. They're usually more respectful about where we want to go as a dojo, and they're also more in tune with what that is if we're the ones teaching more frequently, because they're hearing what we're teaching, and then they don't feel like an outsider, but they know their role. They know that, hey, I'm just offering an alternative way of looking at this exact same thing. They're probably not going to try to throw something from out in left field out into their teaching thing. They're not going to try to throw something out there that's, you know, incorrect necessarily, or that's not in line with what we're teaching. So that's another advantage of, like, having these structures in place in that way.
All right, so excuse me, I gotta take my dog out.
Take the puppy out.
So she runs the house.
She does run the house. She keeps tippy tapping and poking me and stuff. So the next thing that are you done with this topic? Go on social media.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave it up to you.
All right, so the next thing we were going to talk about, which we have talked about before, is social media. So social media is interesting, and I have a little bit more. Hopefully, the guys from Sarasota just watched you do that. Social media is something that, like, we both have experience with it. I have more experience with it on the business side just because I've used it so much. And we did an entire podcast on social media and kind of the do's and don'ts. But we did want to talk about this briefly when it comes to community building. Especially over the past year with COVID and all that stuff, a lot of people have really turned to social media to try to, like, use Facebook groups and build communities that way. A great example of that is Karate at Home. I'm not saying it's a bad example of, like, building a group. The group is huge, and they have this great structure. I'm not as involved in the group, so I don't know for sure if it's a great community, if it's made new connections. Maybe it has, but it's a huge group that's grown. But if you want to talk about building a group where people are really interconnected, really interacting, sharing ideas, there are great methods of doing that.
Yeah. I think they're a great venue.
They are a great venue.
It is a place where everybody could go know that this is the style of karate that's being taught, but it's taught by so many different people from so many different, lifestyles and perspectives.
You mean a Karate at Home or just
Karate at Home?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that is the genius of what their success, and I think that's the genius and success for social media too. Is like some people take it to where group and community building on social media is not a venue. but an actual like club or platform to promote themselves.
Yeah, so this is where it gets tough. I think it's way tougher to build a community on social media than anywhere else. It depends on what it is. Like, I've seen fitness communities that are very supportive of each other because everyone's kind of in this together, and a lot of people are more open to sharing their struggles and what they're going through. I find with karate it's harder. I have been part of and run a few groups, and getting people to share sometimes is like pulling teeth. They'll share other people's content and like cool videos and whatever, but nobody really opens up as far as depth goes. And I mean, that is asking a lot of people. Some people are very private. They don't want to share things they're struggling with publicly. Yeah. I don't care as much, so I will try to invoke that conversation. But even sometimes asking questions in groups to try to get people to interact, allowing people to be more open about struggles or funny things or whatever, just building some camaraderie. Sometimes it's difficult because people don't always necessarily want to respond to you, and sometimes you'll have the same people responding every time. Other people are kind of onlookers.
Yeah. And I think it's partly that is like most karateka that are in those groups or on Facebook or whatever tend to be older.
Yeah, and they are. And
the older generations are more of a consumer and not a participant. And
we mean older as in like older than 25, basically. Right. Like pretty much anybody under 25. Like some of them, I know that some of them are on Facebook, but Facebook is statistically an older platform.
Right.
Well, I mean, like as far as age-wise, but also as far as the people on the platform are essentially older. And a lot of them are not super comfortable with sharing their thoughts publicly like that.
Right.
Part of the reason why I feel that is true is because they see so much bull crap from other people. Sometimes people will share their thoughts and they're not really trying to help promote conversation. They're just giving these exhortations and dissertations and whatever about what they believe and this, that, and the other, and it goes on and on and on, and they're not really adding any value to the conversation, even though for some reason they think they are. So, it's more about look at me, not hey, let's talk about this as a community.
I must just say this: if you're part of a group, Facebook, whatever, right, when you introduce yourself, please don't give me your family history. Please don't give me the day you started to the day to day and your day in, day out, and what your achievements are, this or that.
Your entire training history.
Your whole pedigree. Honestly,
I trained with all these people.
Most of the time, half these people drop names, and we're like, who's that?
Yeah.
We honestly don't know who they are, right? Or they'll say a big name. They'll say, oh, I trained with Inoue. It's like, okay, did you train with him on a daily basis, or did you go to seminars and had like a couple courses with him?
Oh, I trained at 3 Nakayama seminars, so I'm a Nakayama student.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, don't do that. Just say, hey, I'm Bill or I'm Jeremiah and I like training and this I've trained for this amount of years.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We don't need to know that you were a national champion as a white belt when you were 6.
Right. Well,
it just
how does that benefit the conversation? Like, I guess everybody goes into a group on Facebook, or everybody goes on Facebook in general with different goals in mind. So if your goal is self-promotion, which for some people it is, and we're not knocking that if that's your thing, because like, look, I do a lot of my social media for business. A lot of it is self-promotion. I don't like it, but that's part of running a business. So when I can, I'm looking at community building type stuff. But other people are not on it for that reason. They don't really care about like invoking conversation. If your goal is to be part of a community and you do want to connect with people, bringing up and throwing in details like that is actually not super impressive to most people. No. I mean, it is, sometimes, honestly, people who are the most impressive are the ones who are quieter and like are not super open about their background and like who they're training with and what they've been doing.
And they have thought-provoking statements or comments.
They show, not tell.
Yeah.
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 All right. So here's the thing that also irks me.
Mm-hmm. Tell us what irks you.
All right. You get into a group, and the group is intended for this one thing, and then you have someone who self-promotes, right?
Over
and over again. So if you're a self-promoter, we're not knocking that. We understand that's business. But if you go on that group page and it's just you for the last 20 posts,
right,
you might want to reconsider that. A, no one's really interested in what you're doing because you ain't getting no feedback.
right.
B, we're all tired of it because ain't nobody commenting.
I have a group where I had to change the rules of the group because I have had people do that where they're constantly sharing their stuff, and this is
turns into spam.
This is to me, this group is precious. I'm trying to help grow this group, and I have someone coming in and self-promoting over and over and over, and it turns people off. Like, I literally had people messaging me telling me like they don't even want to go in the group because they just see this other person posting their crap all the time, and I was finally like, look, enough. You can only self-promote on this day in this group because you're not adding to the conversation. Right. If you're going to self-promote, it has to be on this day, and all posts have to be approved. Right. So sometimes, as if you're running a group, by the way, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to set those boundaries, and it sucks because for some people it's a turnoff because they want their stuff shared immediately. But you know what? If you want to maintain the integrity of the group and you want to have a group where people are open, I would rather have fewer discussions that are more meaningful rather than having someone just sharing stuff over and over again. Because a lot of times people who are pumping out content, sometimes they're taking really good stuff and they're breaking it into smaller pieces and sharing it, and sometimes the stuff is really good. Other times people who are not as experienced are just kind of sharing things and there's not a lot of depth or thought to it. And so that's an issue as well. But you know, that's a whole other topic.
Right. But so here's the thing too. If you look at the guys that self-promote a lot,
right,
they usually do it on their own page.
Yeah.
And they create their interest to their page, their brand.
Right. And usually other people are sharing their stuff. Other people are trying to create conversation around it.
Right. Using their content, right?
Yeah.
I have not seen someone get successful off of sharing or spamming group pages. It's almost like it works the other way.
People get annoyed by it.
Yeah, it's counterproductive. Right. It's like if you want to share and promote yourself, create a page, Joe Blow karate page, and then do Joe Blow videos all day long.
And look, you can create some. This is a business strategy too. This is just from the out. This is for people who are being offended by what we're saying. If you want to self-promote, there is a business strategy where people will create a Facebook group that is specifically tailored toward people who are interested in your content, and you're sharing your content into that group, and they feel more free to have those discussions, especially if that group is private, versus on a Facebook page, which now you can hardly ever see anything from a Facebook page because they want you to pay for advertising and stuff like that. Right. So if you want to, and it doesn't mean that other people can't share in your group if you allow them to do so. But you can actually you can really target down your whole niche of people that you want to work with or whatever it is you're doing, promoting yourself. If you want to have people who are like hardcore fans of yours, that's how you create your community. Is you literally create your own group, you share your own stuff. You don't spam somebody else's group because it pisses people off. Right. Instead, you create your own group and you have a smaller group of people who love your stuff, who want to comment on it, who want to take part in it. That's how you build your community. Don't go in somebody else's group and take it over. Right.
So I think the guy that's probably the most successful at building his own page and his own brand and doing his own thing and then having like that content spread out through the people that like him is Scott Langley. If you watch Scott, he's putting information content out all the time.
Right. He's taking bigger things and cutting it down. Into
absolutely.
Pieces. Right.
But have you ever seen him spam another page?
No.
No, it's always been on his own page or his dojo page or his group page, organization page. It has never been on other people's things unless someone else shared it on there.
Right, and that's different.
And that changes the perspective completely.
Right.
And he's very successful.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't get some of these guys that go, I'm going to just do it this way. And why aren't I successful? It's like, well, because that's not the right way to do it.
Right.
You know? It's like,
right. And, and like this is kind of like two different conversations. Self-promotion and this idea of like, building your business and your brand, but also in the process getting really good at your craft so that people actually want to share your stuff. Right. Like if they're not sharing it, then just go back to the drawing board and get better at it or change your perspective. But on the flip side, building a community. So that is two different things. But make sure that you know where you're coming from and then orient your social media actions accordingly, because those of us who want to build communities, we're getting annoyed by you.
Yeah, so I think a community is a great gauge on how good your content is.
Sure.
Because that is how
having
you gauge,
your own community. Yeah.
Yeah, how your own community grows is really reflective on how good your content, how good you describe things, where you're at.
Yeah.
You know, if you're saying some stuff that doesn't make any sense at all, and nobody's following, but then you feel like, oh, then I just need to put more information out.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah.
So
what we're saying is, build a cult, and make sure that everyone is a hardcore follower of you, or a follower of you.
Well, build a cult and make them want to drink the Kool-Aid, not
Yeah.
shove it down their throat.
Right. Don't shove the Kool-Aid down random people's throats. That's weird. You have to use your charisma and convince them to join your cult and squish them into a little group, and then you'll all drink the Kool-Aid together.
Yeah, well, kind of, sort of.
That was probably not a good way to end that.
No, it wasn't. It was pretty morbid, but whatever. But you get the point, though. It's this whole idea that we're building groups, and
Somebody's got a purple motorcycle outside, or a bicycle or something, so I'm staring at it. Anyhow, so what you working on?
What do you? Same thing you're working on, Chinte.
Right on.
Yeah. Chinte is a kata that we as a wife and husband haven't trained on the same thing a lot.
Right.
We did it at first, but then I kind of pulled off, started doing my own thing, just cause.
All
right.
Different.
No, it's just my mind was in different things, going different directions. And now we're doing Chinte together. It's kind of interesting to see like the corrections. The corrections are similar,
right,
but not exact.
Right.
And that to me opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's like something, we both have been we're both strong at different points in our karate. You have way better form than I do. I feel like my movement's cleaner than yours, though, in a sense.
Sometimes mine's more segmented.
Huh?
Sometimes mine's more segmented.
Yeah, so my movement's cleaner than yours.
Right. That's what I said, too.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. You downplayed it. But anyways, here we go. You're like, yeah, sometimes.
No, I didn't.
Sometimes my
No, I said, yeah, my movements are more... Okay, anyway,
sometimes
go
more
ahead.
Segmented. You dropped out the sometimes then.
Go ahead, I'm looking at the purple motorcycle.
Anyways, that's just me giving you a hard time.
Yes.
But Chinte is one of those katas that I don't know enough about, that I did a little bit of training on, but, don't know enough about, so I thought it'd be a great time to do that. And I'm working on Path of Technique right now, going through 3 move segments and going through that whole idea. It's difficult right now as the Tate Shuto 2.
It's actually not a purple motorcycle. It's a big bundle of Mylar purple balloons.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Squirrel.
Go ahead.
Ooh, squirrel. The hardest part right now is for me to do the Fudodachi, Tate Shuto, Shifter, Zenkutsudachi, Gyakutsuki. So,
Me too.
rooted stance, standing hand,
Yeah.
knife hand block, to the open hand reverse punch thing.
Right.
I have a tendency of coming up on my right leg forward. When I do the technique out, my front stance will actually rise vertically.
Yeah.
And that's the issue.
Right.
And then the elbow strike to the shift to back stance knife hand block is, everybody goes, oh, that's easy. But in reality, what happens is a lot of times, and for me especially, is when I do the pivot, my body weight doesn't shift to the back leg. It just stays centered. And I make the shape of a back stance, but my weight's 50-50. And that's what I saw.
That's good.
No, that's not good. So that's me right now. There's those sections there, and then the path of the hands. What about you?
I've been making some adjustments to like the positioning of the Fudodachi. I had my angle kind of wrong because whenever I would transition into Zenkutsudachi, my stance was too wide. And it's messing up other things, and also too long. So I'm not getting my hips around enough on the reverse punches, and then also on the elbow strike, that section's totally messed up. And then I'm having some issue with the timing of driving the punch and actually driving with the back leg and hip rotation and all that kind of stuff. So that whole section on the way back at the beginning of Chinte, having some struggles with that. And I got a pretty long list of stuff and the rest of the kata as well that I'm working on, but that timing thing is a big one right now. Chinte is kind of strange. Like it's a kata that I have avoided for a while because it was overworked for me. You know, a few years back. But like with the fudodachi thing, that makes things a lot different. Not in like a Sochin weird way. Sochin, it has its own, I don't know, very strong, like there's hip rotation, but not a lot kind of thing.
Yeah.
Chinte is weird because you're transitioning out of these fudodachi whenever you're going into your hip rotation. So there's it makes it, to me, a little bit more technical, kind of. I mean, there is a technicality to trying to control your stance while you're going into a shomen position in fudodachi, but when you're doing that and you're having to not just go into shomen, but also go into a proper different stance, and then also that stance be in the right structure, I feel like it's a lot of, it's just difficult.
Yeah, the articulation of the technique is definitely more difficult than Sochin itself. Sochin to me is very...
Sochin is just athletically a very difficult kata.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but technically it's not as...
I feel like
challenging,
it's
but it's not as difficult as Chinte.
To me, Sochin is a lot more like focus on the structure. Chinte is more like now you have to take that structure and you have to be able to move in and out of it a lot more. So there's that. But that's kind of that's the biggest things I'm struggling with, is like getting that is still... Fudodachi is still weird for me. Like, I know I spend a lot of time on Sochin, but I don't have my angles right when I step forward on that stance. I always want to be way too wide, and then when I transition to front stance, that's the tell right there. Is like if your stance was too wide in Sochin, if you're stepping too wide in Sochin, then when you're doing it now, when you're doing that fudodachi now in Chinte, you're totally screwed up. So yeah, I'm having to reconfigure some of that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and, Steve, actually, there's a video on YouTube where I think he's teaching in Ireland, and he's going over Chinte in application, and there's literally a 5-second segment in that 45-minute video, I think, where he does the tate shuto reverse punch, tate shuto reverse punch, tate shuto elbow strike, knife hand block, and he does it so damn fluid and so damn crisp, man. I was like, and that's where I realized like half of my mistakes, like. I know there's more, but the ones I can realize were like, oh, my body position was wrong. My transition was wrong. I was moving my shoulders too much. Yeah. Oh, dude, he can shift from one stance to the other in any speed and still have complete control. Right. And I know I flop in my fudodachis. I get about 60-70%, and all of a sudden I fall into it. You know?
Okay, yeah.
And it's
I
like,
had that too.
Oh.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I feel like a toddler compared to a Division I athlete.
I feel like when you start a new kata trying to fix it, that's what it feels like all over again. Like you're a toddler all over again, even though you know the kata.
Yeah, you're running, falling on your face, bam.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working on. Yay.
Well, thanks guys for listening, and hopefully this helps a little bit, and we didn't offend too many people. If we did, we don't care that much.
I care.
No, he doesn't.
I care about.
No, he doesn't.
I care about your feelings.
No, we don't. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Ben Shapiro. Awesome.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Bye.